Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about Lord of the Flies, Chapter 4. So specifically today, we're going to talk about an increase in savagery among the boys, painted faces, a possible rescue gone wrong, and finally, a pig. We're also going to talk a little bit about mood, what it is, and how it is created in the story. So before we get to mood, let's do a little recap. One of the first things we see in chapter 4 is this increase in savagery. And we see it specifically with two boys, Roger and Maurice, who we haven't really gotten to know super well yet. And so this is one of our first experiences getting to know these two boys. And we see them, and they're very mean and savage to the little ones who are playing on the beach, building sandcastles, trying to stay distracted. And they come in and they just destroy the sandcastles. And so we see them both react a little bit differently to their own destruction. So we're going to take a look at that. Roger led the way straight through the castles, kicking them over, burying the flowers, scattering the chosen stones. Maurice followed, laughing, and added to the destruction. Now, though there was no parent to let fall a heavy hand, Maurice still felt the unease of wrongdoing. So Maurice, although he goes along with the destruction, he feels a sense of wrongdoing, and he knows that they shouldn't be doing this and that he shouldn't be, hurting the little kids. So he feels embarrassed, he feels that he's done the wrong thing, and he leaves the scene. He goes off to go swimming. Roger, on the other hand, keeps this savagery and destruction going. And so he follows one of the boys, and he begins to throw stones at him. And it's interesting because he throws these stones and, he's clearly out to get or out to annoy this little boy. But it says that there's still a space around Henry, around the little boy, perhaps 6 yards in diameter, into which he dare not throw. Here, invisible yet strong, was the taboo of the old life. Round the squatting child was the protection of parents and school and policemen and the law. So again, Roger is a little more into this than Maurice is, but he also still feels, that he can't throw it directly at Henry. He still feels the rules and the laws that he would normally be subjected to on the island. So we see this, descent into savagery, but it's not quite there yet. They're not all the way savage. They still remember and feel that they're doing the wrong thing at some level. So we have that at the beginning of the chapter. While this is happening, Jack is busy. Oh, there's Roger, scary. But Jack is busy with his newest plan, which is to paint his face to disguise himself for when he goes hunting. And so he does this. He gets white clay, red clay, and some charcoal, and he paints his face. And we see this change come about him. And the author describes the change in the book. He looked in astonishment, no longer at himself, but at an awesome stranger. He began to dance, and his laughter became a bloodthirsty snarling. He capered toward Bill, and the mask was a thing on its own, behind which Jack hid, liberated from shame and self-consciousness. So I want to look at this, the last bit of this line. The mask was a thing on its own. So once Jack puts this on, it's a thing that kind of takes over him, and he hides behind it. He's no longer shameful. He's no longer self-conscious. So all the things that he was feeling before, he wanted to be leader, he wanted to become very powerful and show everyone that he was powerful and he could kill the pig. He's now hidden behind this mask, and it sort of starts to change him. And we'll see how that change continues throughout the book. But it's the first sort of sign of him becoming a little bit different and being able to express himself in a different way. So he's going off to hunt. While this is happening, Ralph and Piggy are on the beach, and they see, well, Ralph sees in the distance smoke on the horizon, which of course is the sign of a ship. And so Ralph sees it, and he's very excited because it's a possible rescue. Someone might see them, someone might come get them from the island. And then there is the shattering realization that there isn't any smoke coming from the island. So the boys investigate, and that's when we find out that the fire is dead. So the fire is dead, it's out, there's nobody there, nobody tending the fire, and Ralph looks back and he sees this smoke from this possible ship fading into the distance. So they've missed their chance. There was someone there that could have seen them and could have rescued them, and there was nothing for them to see. There was no smoke. There was no signal fire. So obviously this isn't good. And so, you know, let's just get right to it. There's the standoff between Jack and Ralph. A little bit awkward. Here we go. So the hunters come back, sure enough, including the hunters that should have been tending the fire because Jack thought they all needed to go hunt the pig. So Ralph sees Jack coming in the distance. He's leading the troop. And we have this one comment here. Simon looked from Ralph to Jack as he had looked from Ralph to the horizon. And what he saw seemed to make him afraid. So in chapter 3, we got to know Simon a little bit more. We know that he is a little bit introspective, he's reflective, he's pretty quiet, but he seems to have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And so he's the one that sees between Jack and Ralph, and he sees, ooh, something is not right. Something is about to happen, and he's scared. So let's take a quick pause really quickly just to talk about Jack. And is he really that tough? Because I know he's got his face paint on and he's got a pig, but he's still just a little boy. And we see evidence of this in the text. So, for example, whenever Jack is explaining to Ralph and to the other boys about the pig that they've caught, there's a couple little hints that we get that he's not totally on board with what he's done or how it went. He noticed blood on his hands and grimaced distastefully, looked for something on which to clean them, and then wiped them on his shorts and laughed. So he sees blood on his hands, and he doesn't just notice it, he sees it and he grimaces. He's like, oh, I don't want that on me, right? And wipes it off. So he's not totally savage yet. He still is taken aback by the sight of blood. Another hint we get is when he says to Ralph, there was lashings of blood. You should have seen it. But he shudders when he says it. So, you know, he's coming off as this hero. He's killed the pig. There was all this blood. But you can tell by the way he says it and by these little details that he's shuddering. He's not super, super confident in this. He's still definitely uneasy about the kill. So that's just a little information on Jack. And we'll see that and we'll talk more about that throughout the book and how he changes and what he portrays versus what he really feels. But back to the fight. So then we get our first taste of violence on the island, real violence between the boys. Obviously, Ralph is very upset and he keeps saying, you let the fire go out. And there was a ship. We could have been saved. And Jack hears this and he's upset by it, but he doesn't react until Piggy steps in. And Piggy says, you and your pigs, you should have just let the fire go. You should have just kept the fire going, right? You shouldn't have let it go out. And this is when Jack starts to actually react. And he sees Piggy and he hears Piggy and he gets angry and he hits Piggy, he punches him in the stomach. Piggy sat down with a grunt. Jack stood over him. His voice was vicious with humiliation. You would you, fatty? Ralph made a step forward and Jack smacked Piggy's head. Piggy's glasses flew off and tinkled on the rocks. So first he punches him, then he makes fun of him, he calls him fatty, and then he smacks him on the head and his glasses get knocked off. And as we know, the glasses are a sign of civilization, they're a sign of reason, intelligence, right? And Jack has literally just hit them off of Piggy's head. So, hello symbolism. Anyway, but it's interesting that he chooses to lash out at Piggy and not Ralph. You know, Ralph is the one who had confronted him and who had said repeatedly, you let the fire go out, I'm the chief, you need to listen to me. But he doesn't really react towards Ralph, he reacts towards Piggy. So it's interesting to think about that and why that is. And we see at the end here, when he is about to smack Piggy's head, Ralph takes a step forward, right? And so Ralph he knows what's going on. Obviously, he's right there in the thick of it. And we're not sure, is Ralph gonna try to stop Jack? Would he have thought of even doing that? So it's an interesting dynamic. It's our first violence between the boys on the island. And it kind of changes the dynamic between Ralph and Jack and Piggy. So we're gonna take a closer look at that. But there they are. Look at Piggy, look at him. we're going to end today by talking a little bit about mood. So what I want you to do is take a look at the next two pictures that I'm going to show. And as I show each one, just think about how each one makes you feel. So obviously those are both photos of beaches, but they both feel very different. So why is that? And so this leads us to talking about mood. So even though they're both beaches, they had very different feels on them. One was very sunny, very relaxing, cute little umbrellas. The other one, we had kind of a storm going on. It looked windy, it looked cold, it looked dark, right? So the same place, a beach, but two totally different moods and two totally different feelings. So today we're going to look at that in our story. So mood, as you guys probably know, is the prevailing emotions or atmosphere of a literary work. The mood of a work is not always what might be expected based on its subject matter. So the mood isn't always something that we can guess based off of the actual action in the book, but it's the atmosphere and the emotions that the author creates as we're reading. And the mood does change usually throughout a work of literature. So as we do this, you're going to think about how the scene makes you feel. And mood is also determined by language, such as imagery and diction. So imagery is that descriptive language that uses our senses, and then diction is word choice. So the words that the author chooses to use. All right, so there are 3 steps for how we establish a mood. So we're going to go over those quickly, and then you guys are going to do the same thing for homework. You're going to look at a passage and determine the mood. All right? So these are the opening lines from chapter 4. The first rhythm that they became used to was the slow swing from dawn to quick dusk. They accepted the pleasures of morning, the bright sun, the whelming sea, and the sweet air, as a time when play was good and life so full that hope was not necessary and therefore forgotten. Toward noon, as the floods of light fell more nearly to the perpendicular, the stark colors of the morning were smoothed in pearl and opalescence, and the heat, as though the impending sun's height gave it momentum, became a blow that they ducked, running to the shade and lying there, perhaps even sleeping. So this is one of the opening parts of chapter 4. So, determining the mood. All right. So step 1, we're going to look at the diction. We're going to analyze it. All right. So I've done this highlighted. You guys are going to do the same thing on your homework. All right. So positive diction is in green. Negative diction is in pink. All right. So you guys can do this following along on your homework sheet. So this is what I've highlighted. Once again, the green is positive and the pink is negative. So as you can see, we've got pleasure, sweet, bright, play good, hope. We've got forgotten, which is a negative word. But for the most part, we've got positive words here. So step 2, decide positive, negative, or neutral. Like we said, there are definitely more positive words in that example. All right, so the mood is definitely positive. And then for step 3, we're going to pick a mood word. So we want something more specific than just positive, good, right? So we're going to look a little bit more specifically at what's actually going on, right? So if we think about that opening scene, the boys are lounging on the beach, the weather's pleasant, the boys are playing, they're happy. So I'm going to say the mood is lighthearted. All right, so that's a little bit more specific than good. It's still a positive feeling, but it just gives us something a little more specific to think about. All right, so for your assignment today, you are going to complete the worksheet on mood in Google Classroom, and it's going to ask you to do those 3 steps. Look at the diction. You're going to highlight, then you're going to decide if it's positive or negative, and then you're going to pick a specific mood word. All right, and I have attached in Google Classroom a sheet that has a list of mood words on it, okay? So that's your assignment. Email me with any questions, and I'll see you guys back here for chapter 5.